Dr. Nicholas Mercer with uImproved PT. So I just spoke with a patient who's having these shoulder issues. So having some pain in the shoulder, and her job involves working in front and kind of turn to the side. And you'll notice when I do that, I come forward and my shoulder comes, if you look here, forward like that, right? And as I turn here, it drops even more back. So that's one reason why we're only seeing this in one shoulder. Now, one thing, when we look at the shoulder, in an absence of weakness, so if the patient is strong and when they rest the arm, the pain gets better and it's not bothering them so much until they get into this about 90-degree position. They may feel some pinching, they may even feel some pain coming down the arm. And especially when we do the Hawkins-Kennedy impingement test, as we come over, right, if we see that shoulder hike, that kind of gives us a good idea that this is going to be a form of impingement, specifically subacromial impingement. But coming forward, you kind of can tell that they're going to hike, and then applying pressure here, they feel that pinching and pain in the shoulder. So that being said, I wanted to explain kind of this, what we call subacromial impingement. Now, that's just kind of a general term for really any impingement or lack of space in the shoulder. And the cause for everyone can be a little bit different, and the symptoms can be a little bit different, but most of the time you'll see the strength in a lot of these motions, especially abduction, remains pretty good, right? They're pretty strong, which gives us an indication that the rotator cuff isn't involved quite as much. Now, if you have subacromial impingement for a long time, that can start to wear at the rotator cuff. You may see a little bit of irritation and wearing of that rotator cuff, a little bit of weakness on that side, but they should still have some strength even if it's a little bit painful. But this patient in particular did not have any weakness in that shoulder, so we kind of caught this early on in the impingement game. So I wanted to show you all here. So what happens when you have this subacromial impingement? So subacromial just means it's under the acromion, which is that bone right on top of that shoulder joint, right? So the acromion forms basically a roof over the glenohumeral joint, which is the typical ball and socket joint you think of when you think of the shoulder. However, when we get this posture where we're coming forward with the shoulder, that acromion starts to close down on that space, causing that wearing of the rotator cuff and just causing everything to get irritated when the patient tries to move their shoulder. So I'm gonna move you a little closer here. All right, so this is basically the model of a typical shoulder, right? So you have the front here, and the back and the scapula is kind of back through here. So right around here, right, you see that supraspinatus, that rotator cuff that normally gets worn down with that subacromial impingement. So if we see the roof here, the acromion, if our shoulder posture, if our positioning is too far forward, it comes over, it closes down on that joint. Then when we go to move the ball and socket joint here, everything, you see all that stuff in there, it starts running into each other, it gets really irritated, it gets really inflamed. So what is the solution for this? Well, it's going to be a little bit different for everyone, but it usually starts with changing positions, changing habits, changing mobility. So if the shoulder is lacking mobility, we get mobility back in that shoulder through some manual techniques, followed by some stretching of the joint capsule and some of the muscles that are restricted, especially if the upper trap has gotten really tight from compensating for so long. The next thing is to get the strength in the appropriate areas. Now that we have that mobility, the ability to get into that better position, we need to stabilize that so we can not only hold that better posture, hold that better position, to open up the space in that joint so we're not running into everything in the shoulder there, and to be able to move from that position of stability. and maintain that stability while we're moving the shoulder joint. So with subacromial impingement, that's kind of what we're looking at. We're looking at getting the mobility back so that we can attain a more scapular, retracted, open chest posture, keeping the shoulders down and back as we perform a lot of the movements that normally irritate that shoulder with this impingement. Getting the stability to hold the scapula there as we're doing some movements, especially overhead, allowing that scapula to move and from a more stable position. And then lastly, just like I said, allowing that scapula to move. So controlling that movement of the scapula so that we're not putting extra stress closing down the space on that shoulder joint. So this is just, again, it's going to be a little bit different for everyone. Everyone has their own unique, specific issues. But that's kind of what we're looking at for treatment of subacromial impingement. One of the main things we want to make sure we prevent is that rotator cuff fraying, right? And eventually what comes later, if we're having all of that pain in that joint, that can turn into frozen shoulder, adhesive capsulitis, which essentially is not very fun, very, very painful, and you lose a lot of motion. A lot of that motion loss can be permanent. So we want to make sure that we don't let it progress to that. So that's kind of the gist of the subacromial impingement. So if you're having shoulder pain and you're not really sure where it's coming from, maybe it's impingement, maybe you have some rotator cuff pathology, definitely let us know by contacting us through our website, uimprovedpt.com. There you will also find a lot of free information, tips, and strategies on alleviating shoulder and neck pain, and basically any other type of pain that you may have. All right, so please feel free to contact us with what you're going through, and let's see how we can help. And that's it for today.